We are live. I think I have all the settings correct. I see the volume moving. We are good. We're live with Mark, Krikke and Brent. Let me try it. Vanderwoude.
Yes.
But that's not the way you say it.
Vanderwoude? I don't know. I don't know. I say Vanderwoude, but...
And both of your backgrounds are...
Well, mine would be Krikke.
Krikke?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right?
Yeah, that sounds serious.
No.
And the ethnic background of both these last names is Dutch.
Yeah.
Wow. And you guys met at Rockstar, and we've had this conversation before, but explain it to me. We're laughing because we started.
Why have we had this?
Yeah. Anyone listening to this, we started this podcast and recorded something, but there was a little setting that was incorrect. It was all my fault. So we had the video, but we had no audio at all.
It might have been better.
I think it was actually, I skipped through it. It looked really good. Like the conversation we had looked engaging. Yeah. I think it was the best podcast we had ever done here. So, so walk us through this. How did you guys met at Rockstar, and then, because you were both interested in real estate, is that how you got to Rockstar in the first place? You're like, I'm going to use real estate to create financial freedom.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
That was it for me.
I think your messaging kind of resonated with both of us, and we found ourselves at a meetup, and we're like, hey, you look Dutch. I forget. I don't know how it came about, but we discovered that we go to the same church, or the same church federation. So not the same individual church, but...
Yeah.
So what is the same church federation? That's a group of churches that all belong together in some capacity. What ties the federation together?
Yeah, like a shared set of beliefs or doctrinal standards that...
So this is something different than being a Protestant, correct?
Yeah.
This federation.
Yeah, within Protestantism, you have different churches, right? And that's... And it's interesting how many different ones there are, and that's maybe we'll talk about if we go back to the Reformation again. But that's sort of like a logical outworking of part of the Reformation, that a lot of different instead of having it centralized. Now people were like, no, I think this is right. I think this is right. Well, I'm going to start my own church. I'm going to do this, right? Oh. So there's lots of different types, if you want to say, of Protestantism is a hard word.
There you go.
Right. You got Baptists, you got Methodists, you got Reformed, right?
See, this is what's always confused me. And this is when you asked me about, like, wow, I'm surprised you didn't read the Reformation when we spoke before, correct? I'm like, well, I went to Catholic...
Read about the Reformation.
Yeah, read about the Reformation. Read about the Reformation. I went to Catholic school, and I guess in my era going to Catholic school in Mississauga, they just talked about the Catholic religion. It wasn't, it was like Roman Catholic. You kind of heard about this Protestant thing, maybe this Eastern Orthodox thing. If you're like a teacher didn't show up and you're like, why aren't they here today? And they're like, oh, well, their Christmas is like on this day or something. You're like, oh, like, well, I didn't understand.
They have a different calendar?
Yeah. What's that all about? But it was really a closed kind of system to me. That's what it felt like at the time. Like, we didn't learn anything about what Protestants would believe and why they believed it. It was really just, that's funny, right? No?
It's understandable because...
Because they hate each other?
Well, the Protestants broke off of the Roman Catholic Church. And
and my whole, and this is why when we were talking, where you're like, I mentioned like my whole understanding of the Protestant kind of religion, am I saying it right? Yeah, Protestant religion, Protestant belief.
I think, the religion would be Christian.
Yeah, so how do you say the Protestant movement?
Movement, that's a good word.
Yeah.
I always picked it up from Netflix historical TV shows when seriously, and this is when you were like, hey, that was like the fiat education way to learn about Protestant. I'm like, I just learned, like, I'm like, oh, this English king, he's upset with the Vatican. He wants to kind of screw them. So he's like saying, hey, forget your Roman Catholic style. I'm going to go with this other style and do something different.
What show was that?
I forget, but there's been like 3 or 4 on Netflix at least. You've never watched such Netflix shows?
We don't watch movies.
No? Is that also part of the Protestant thing that you don't watch movies? Anyway, so give me the lowdown on, like, what does this mean to you guys? You guys are Protestants. This is a big part of your life. I think for me, I blocked out a lot of things that I went through in school, but you guys clearly do not. And this is a big part of you. What does it mean to you to say, hey, I'm Christian and I'm Protestant? What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, like practically speaking, and when it comes to real estate as well, it's about stewardship, right? So there's this idea that everything we have is a gift. So God gives us gifts, and that can be different forms, right? So it could be like people often go to money as that, like, oh, this is a gift from, but yeah, it is. But there's also like your talents, your intelligence, your health, your family, all these things. These are gifts that God gives to us, and then we have to use it wisely. Right. So I don't know if you watch like Lord of the Rings, you had the Stewards of Gondor, right? So these were the guys. Have you watched that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So the stewards weren't the actual royal family, right? They were waiting for the true king to come back. Right. And you can see there's some parallels here already. Right. So that was, what's his face? Strider, Aragorn.
Wow.
Right. He was the true heir of the kingdom. So the stewards were just watching over that kingdom until the true king came back, right? And then eventually they became corrupt, and they just acted as though it was their own kingdom, and that wasn't a good scene. But the whole point is, it's kind of this, like, that's an example of being a steward, right? And they were called the Stewards of Gondor. So we have the same thing, right? Everything that we have, it's not ours. Right? With Bitcoin, it's like not your keys, not your coins, your keys, your coins. So yeah, that's true. But for us, it would be like, no, everything I have, I'm just kind of taken care of for God, because he gave this to me as a gift. And then I got to do the best that I can with it. But I have to remember it's not mine. So I can't be too attached to it either, right? That's a temptation, especially in real estate and people who start building wealth. You're like, oh, this is all my wealth. This is my security. This is what I take comfort in, right? For us, that's not what it's about, right? We have security, and that's God's gift of salvation to us. That really gives us security and contentment in our life, or it's supposed to anyways, right? We're not perfect, and we often get sucked into materialism and consumerism.
So the highest calling for you would be to maximize your talents, and you are not possessing or directly owning really anything. You are maximizing the implementation of your talents in your current life in whatever form that may be. And then the wealth that you gain from whatever you're doing with those talents really is you being rewarded perhaps for some of those talents, but it's not, that wealth isn't really yours. You just are getting the benefit of sharing talents, earns you some wealth, but you don't really possess that wealth, is what you're saying. It's just one benefit from acting in line with the principles that you believe in.
Yeah. So
am I saying that?
I can jump in. So one thing we believe is that, like, what is the purpose of mankind, right? Like, that's a really deep question, I think.
Brent, tell us. Yes.
But yeah, the Bible kind of explains it, that, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So the two kind of parts to that is you live your life, even your life, right? You can't say like, I was born because I'm so good, right? It's like, no, you were given life, right? And that's kind of where it starts, right? You were given life, you were given, parents, a family, you were given relationships, you were given time on this earth, you're given health. And all those things you kind of, from a Christian worldview, you kind of acknowledge that they come from God, right? He created us, he created this world, and then he gives us all these things. And then what do we do with them, right? Like we could hoard things for ourselves. We could be selfish and self-serving. And I think generally people think that's probably not the greatest thing to do, but it comes from, like a Christian context of, we've been given these things. Okay. Now what do we use them for? Well, we use them for the glory of God, right? And how do we know what the glory of God is? It's pretty simple. We just read the Bible and you can kind of get a really good idea of what glorifies God, like what behaviors glorify God, what uses of your time would be the best service. And that goes to the second point, which is like to enjoy him forever, which ties back to what Mark said about stewardship, is this eternal context, right? Because with investors, it's kind of cool, like to be in a community of investors where people think long-term, and most people in our culture don't think long-term, right? They don't think, oh, you know what? In 10 years, they just think I got to work tomorrow, or so I got to get to bed and then I work and then I'm going to have a bunch of cash for the weekend and whatever, right? And we have this kind of like, I don't want to say pandemic, but epidemic of short-term thinking. But in a Christian worldview, it's long-term, but it's eternal, right? You think about an eternity because God is eternal, and we believe, you go to heaven. That is an eternal existence with God, and it's an opportunity to enjoy him forever. So we kind of live this life in that context, knowing that, our actions, our words, our thoughts are supposed to bring God glory, and then also like with the context of eternity.
That's interesting that it gives you a long-term perspective, thinking the way you've just outlined it. So what would you say to someone if I was to say, well, yeah, I kind of agree with a lot of that, but I don't know if I have to map it back to God, because I think we talked about this a bit before, that if I have my own principles I live by, do the right thing, give 110%, treat others as you would treat yourselves. What would you say to somebody like myself who thought, and I think that came from me just kind of shunning a little bit of my school system and being so disappointed with some of the things that I went through there. I wasn't abused or anything, and it wasn't like that bad. Like it's just some of the schooling I went through, I guess, in the Catholic school system. I think I shared this too. Just like when I got married, it was kind of like this weird experience. There was like nothing fun or positive about it, and there was no context like the way you described. So I think I just came to this myself, like, oh, here's the way I'm going to live. And this seems to guide me really well. It gives me long-term perspective. Yeah. What would you say to someone like me who's living by these principles, but perhaps doesn't tie it back to the Bible, God, something like that?
I think my first question would be, what do you base that on, right? You kind of just alluded to it. You're like, these kind of principles, they seem to be the right thing to do, right?
You know where I based them on?
Yeah.
I watched a video from this one coach from Notre Dame. I'm not even joking.
Football,
I'm not even joking. I based it on football. And this coach outlined the principles for the team. I'm not even joking. Okay. And I watched this video in my early 20s, I guess. I watched the video and I thought, that's just such a perfect summary. Yeah. I'm going to live the rest of my life. It was like a sales VP that was sharing all this information with us. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, because I've listened to this podcast forever and I've always wondered where that comes from.
Yeah, it came from like a very famous, I should look him up, a very famous Notre Dame football coach.
Wow.
Who outlined it, and there was a video, and it was one of those like motivational videos. I think the sales VP was trying to get everyone pumped up. And a part of the video, the coach just outlines like, here's the way we are going to live as this family. And he outlined these 3 principles. And I thought, that's just perfect. Simple. Yeah. I'm going to live the rest of my life from this day following those principles. And that's where I got the principles from. So yeah, there you go. Could I give you a better layup to answer?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people kind of live that way, or have similar notions, right? And it's like, where do these ideas come from? Right? They don't just appear like
do this the coach right thing.
Yeah. What's the right thing? So you go a little bit deeper. Like, it's like when you're looking at, I think for us here, we got into real estate, realized it was good. Like I didn't realize why, right? After we bought our second property, I was like, oh, I should probably figure out why this is a good idea, totally, right? Yeah. And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole of, and then sort of get into macro, but it's always like, you want to know why, right? And sort of first principles question, right? Like, why is real estate good? Oh, because it outperforms everything else. Oh, why does it outperform everything else? And then you get into like our corrupt money system. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay. So this is like one of the only ways for regular people to outpace the money system. Why is the money system so bad? And then you get into like money, and then you get into Bitcoin. So it's the same thing. Like, what is the right thing to do? Why is treating other people the right thing to do? Why is not killing somebody because you want to take their stuff? Why would we do that? Right? So it comes down to the fact that there's truth. There's absolute truth. And that's sort of under attack in popular thinking, right? This whole idea that there is actually an absolute standard, right? So you had, the Christianity, you had Enlightenment, you had like all these different eras where people's thinking kind of changed. You get to modernism, postmodernism, right? Nietzsche wrote about, God is dead, right? And he was saying that from a point of despair, right? You often hear that people say, this is what Nietzsche said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the era of God is over. But what he actually said is God is dead and we have killed him. So it's, by our own hubris, we've put away Christian principles and the things that we've learned and a lot of these truths, and we've moved towards like a man-centered truth. And you can kind of see how that has worked out through postmodernism, relativism, right? Where, okay, there is no absolute truth, but truths are in relation to each other. And now we're in a post-truth society where the only truth is my feelings. And that's the only thing that matters for me. And the only truth for you is your feelings and we can see what's happening with that. And it's just,
let's see where this goes.
You see where it goes. And,
horror show.
Especially young people are just so anxious, so depressed. They have nothing to hold on to because there's no truth anymore. So that whole thing, thing of like the golden rule, treat others, live your life a certain way, like that doesn't apply because why? Mm-hmm. That assumes that there's an actual truth and there's a moral standard where, acting well or not killing somebody or not stealing, all these things actually have a meaning. Mm-hmm. And where do they come from, right? If the only truth is my feelings, well, then I can do whatever I want because it doesn't really matter, right? So,
and who are you to say that I'm wrong, right? Like if you did something and that was your truth, who are you to hold up this standard, like your own personal view against mine and, tell me I'm wrong, right? And then, you see all these sexual perversions that are at play now in our culture, right? Kind of, is that truth? Like, is it true that you can change your gender based on your feelings? Like, is it actually true? Or is it just some sort of, perversion based on someone's idea of truth in their head?
So how do you reconcile that there's absolute truth with your human decision to accept that the version of truth you believe true is the one you're looking at? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, you have to question. Right? That's really, if you just accept something blindly without questioning, like what is the value in that, right? So for us, we hold that the Bible is sort of that standard of truth. That's something that's been divinely inspired and given to us as sort of the guide for life, if you want to call it. Or
you say it's divinely inspired too, but like the Bible itself tells us that it's divinely inspired as well, right?
Yeah.
Like all scripture is God breathed. And
why are you bringing that point up? You think?
Well, I'm just saying, because like you could say, well, what about my book? Mm-hmm. My book is, we believe that's the best book, right? So you kind of have to get to the validity of the Bible as a scriptural truth or as that base.
Yeah. Okay. And at a certain point, it's faith. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Everybody has faith in something. Whether you're an atheist, you have faith that what you believe is actually true, right? Mm-hmm. That God doesn't exist and that the universe was, created by chance, right? That's faith. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like the reason that is because people don't know everything, right? Like we don't know everything. We never will. So we have to believe something, right? And people will believe whatever they think is right or whatever their parents told them or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So even the atheist, like you said, believes something, right?
Yeah.
I can see how I could spend there's just so much to this. Like you spend, obviously you spend a lifetime going through all of this. Why are you, so you brought up Bitcoin a couple times, and I think I know why you're bringing up Bitcoin, but can you tell us, how did you get to this understanding of what is your current understanding of Bitcoin? Or maybe the better question is what role does Bitcoin play in your current framework of thinking?
Ooh.
So initially it was like, well, look at this thing. It's going up like crazy.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Mark, how much do you have?
We're going to get rich. Yeah. You should buy some of this stuff. Yeah.
Everyone steward your wealth.
Yeah.
Let's do this. It's kind of like
we started a group, right? We started a little chat group, and we had 3 people in it.
Yeah.
And then the price came down.
Yeah. And the chat stopped.
Yeah. Stopped.
It's like
I'll never forget when sorry, Mark, I'm going to let you answer, but when I'm a big gold guy. I guess since 2008, it was like I got to figure out this gold thing. I think we rehashed this in 2008. It was our family almost lost everything in the 90s. So then when 2008 happened and it looked like the financial world was going to come to an end, I got caught off guard and I finally decided to study macroeconomics, and that led me to gold, and I turned into a real gold guy. I really understood why real estate started to outperform. That's when I really understood at first principles of like, wow, this is why real estate is outperforming. It might be the leverage that I'm using and not the proper, there's nothing magical really about real estate in and of itself. It's this whole leverage concept and being able to handle the leverage. And then, going down the kind of the whole gold thing, I remember someone mentioning Bitcoin to me at least twice. The first time, it was a Your Life, Your Terms event. One of the AV guys turns to me and says, "Hey, I'm buying this thing." And he shows it to me on his phone. And he's like, "It's this Bitcoin thing?" And I'm just kind of like, dude, like, we're going to start the Rockstar coin. Okay. Yeah. Like, how about that? We'll start. Have you done that? You have your bit. No, we never will. But, he's like, we have this Bitcoin thing. I'm like, how about this? I have the Rockstar thing and I'll make some Rockstar coins. You want some of those Rockstar? And he didn't know enough to even challenge that. We just kind of laughed. And then I was reading more and more about gold, and then the Bitcoin had the run up in 2017. Yeah. And then it kind of crashed down, and I expected it to go to like absolute zero. Like I thought, oh my gosh, like this, there it goes. It's this whole tulip thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I checked in on it maybe 2018 or around then. And to my shock, it wasn't at zero. It was I think it was around 6K. Yeah. Something like that. And I remember being stunned. Yeah. Like, wait, why is this thing not at zero? But I moved on. And then the next time I was at a conference, and some guy's going back into the conference after break, and we knew each other a little bit. And he goes, Tom, I think he was a Rockstar member that happened to be there. And he goes, Tom, have you looked into that Bitcoin thing anymore? And when someone says something and it shocks you a little bit. And I paused, and he put his arm around me and he said, I'm really surprised you haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. And then he just walked off. And I remember just being like, when you have one of those moments,
challenge
what have I been missing here? And then, I still ignored it. Okay. I still ignored it. And then eventually during the pandemic and that shut down, I started reading, all about macroeconomics. And that's when I was like, wow. And that's when I ran to Nick's office going, I was wrong. Yeah. I was so wrong. We got to buy some of this shit immediately. And then we bought a little bit and we thought we had enough. And then we're like, no, we got to buy more of this.
Yeah, now and Nick's just holding the reins.
Yeah. Nick's like keeping me just in check, right? So anyway, that's a little bit of my own journey through this process. But Mark, I'm curious, how did you get to it, and what's your story around it?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was I don't know, probably a little bit of Rockstar information too, right? But yeah, the price, it's going up. We should, my wife bought me some for a birthday a little bit, and then it went up, it really went up. We were like, oh, wow, right? But then, I don't know. So we said, as Christians, we always question, right? You're always questioning, looking, and, we kind of, I think, do the same with just with personal investments too, right? You're always looking. So I looked into you got this Bitcoin, you got Ethereum, you got Solana, right? All the use cases, and then eventually came to the conclusion, these are all garbage. There's no good reason for them to exist. And Bitcoin is actually it's truth. In so much as we can have truth on earth here, right? Because again, we have that sort of eternal perspective, but it's, what does Greg Foss say? It's math plus code equals truth, I think. Mm-hmm. And he's an interesting one to quote, but it really resounds with us and kind of aligns with our values. And so I think when we were on last time, it was just after Halloween, and look, there's 2 important things yesterday, right? One was the anniversary of the Reformation, the start of it, when Martin Luther kicked things off. But then it was also the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper from Satoshi. And I don't think it was an accident that he released it on the same day, right? So it both kind of marked the start of a move away from centralization. So in the case of the Reformation, it was moving away from the corrupt, centralized religious authority and putting responsibility and information back into the hands of regular people, right? A Bible that they could read in their own language instead of relying on a priest to tell them something once a week, maybe like, oh, you should do this, or this is what the church says, do that. Actually give them the information so that they can read the Bible and be like, I don't think this is right. That's what Martin Luther did with Bitcoin. You've got this move away from centralized, like from central banks, right? Giving us financial information that we can look at and hold and keep for ourselves. So the fruits of our labors when we're working are not going to be taken away via inflation and
theft.
Theft essentially.
So was the
right?
Reformation and the printing press we talked about this and I forget, was it around about the exact same time or no?
Yeah.
Printing press, I think, was probably 75 years before Martin Luther started, really started going.
Okay, because that I'm always kind of fascinated on how technology moves mankind or humankind kind of in different directions. And it seems like the Reformation really benefited from the printing press because this idea really would have a limited influence in the world if it wasn't for the printing press that was able to document some of these new ideas. Because at that time, I think the Vatican would be the center of information and the center of centralized distribution of ideas and thoughts and the way you should live. But the printing press could take something like the Reformation, put it down on paper, and that could be distributed much more freely. So I think
one example was at the time of the Reformation, the Roman Catholic Church was selling indulgences, right? I don't know if you ever heard.
Yeah, no, I have. Yeah.
Okay,
Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so they were selling basically, I think it's pieces of paper that were basically saying, if you pay money,
allowed you to do these sins, basically.
You can buy your way into heaven, or buy your family members' way into heaven, or basically you can pay for your sins by your financial contribution to the church, right? So you can think of the church as like kind of a central power authority at the time that had, they have the scriptures they were basically
the toll booth to heaven.
Yeah, and they have
a spot to be in.
They have the truth, right? The scripture truth in a different language, so you can't understand it. And then only that guy is allowed to read it because there's no books, right? So like there's no mass media. We don't have it on our phones. So one guy reads it, one guy says a few things, and then all the people who rely on their salvation to get to heaven hear this every week, and they're like, well, shoot, I got to pay money to the church to get to heaven, right? So what happened with Martin Luther and the reformers at the time was, the printing press was a technological invention that really happened. But they happen at the same time. So these guys read the Bible and they say, you know what, it doesn't actually say that. Let's reveal the truth and let's put it on this decentralized platform called books, and we'll spread it everywhere. And the church just like, we got to stamp this out. Like, we are going to burn the books. Like, we're going to, torture the people. And they try everything they can, right, to stamp it out. But it just spreads like crazy, right? Because people are hungry for the truth. They're living in this world where they just have to give money to the church and see you later, right?
Yeah.
And then this kind of changes and basically makes Western culture like happen. It's it's pretty monumentous event in history.
How does it make Western culture happen?
Yeah, so that
a big comment.
Well, it was a change in thinking, right? So again, away from that centralized authority. So
so that you could have a system that's decentralized and still operate, not dependent on a central authority for what to do tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, like, atheism really stands on the shoulders of Christianity. It wouldn't be possible without Christianity and without specifically the Reformation, where you can actually, again, we're decentralizing information and the authority to store and to hold information into the hands of people. So now scientists could experiment and do and question, be like, the church has been the authority in science and everything else. Like, is this actually true? right? Now I have some license to actually go and do experiments and explore and figure things out, right? So you had sort of enlightenment thinking.
So it okayed the ability for someone to have critical thought without feeling like that was wrong.
Yeah.
So it enabled critical thinking on everything.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's probably a simplification.
Yeah.
But and really said, like, you have to think critically, not just like you have to. It's your responsibility to do that, to examine the world, to examine your life.
Like that's one of God's commands in Genesis when he creates mankind. He's like, okay, now go and steward the earth, like have dominion over the earth, be fruitful and multiply, right? So, have children, steward the earth. Let's figure this stuff out. Let's research things. Let's do experiments and let's develop the earth, right? In a stewardly manner, which means for the glory of God, right?
Yeah. And I mean, interesting note on that too, right? People always talk about technology and we have technology. We don't need God anymore. Like God is also the God of technology, right? There's some examples in the Bible as well. So a fella named Tubal-Cain, where God gave him the gift and the abilities to fashion tools and to do things like this, right? So that early advent of technology, it's also a gift from God. And that's how we look at it too, right? So like Bitcoin as a technology, that's a gift and we got to use it. We got to steward it properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an interesting parallel too with Christianity and Bitcoin is once you discover the truth, you just want to share it, right? So you have evangelists, and the same thing with Bitcoin. Once you're like, hey, this makes sense, let's tell everybody. And your podcast is an example. It's like we've shifted.
Yeah, I've come at it definitely from a road of like, the money side of things, like we are just being cheated and stolen from.
But it's like, guys, why don't you get this?
We're slamming the table. Yeah. That's interesting. So, because I do believe that Bitcoin could potentially be a massive inflection point on humanity, that it's that big of a thing. And I think with people listening to this who haven't studied it would just be like, okay, now we know he's gone off the deep end. But I just really believe that if you have this thing that really nobody can change or steal or manipulate, that all around it the world is forced into a sort of order, if that makes sense. Whereas do you kind of see where I'm coming from?
Well, you can see the opposite is true if you look at the effects of,
and that might be the better way to explain it. You're right, because you can see the opposite is true. And I think the fact that I was just talking about this at the gym with somebody there. We were saying how we don't respect our elders anymore. And
I respect you, Tom.
Damn, am I that old?
I respect both of you.
Jesus Christ. No, now I'm swearing. I'm using the Lord's name in vain in front of you guys. Holy shit. Now I'm out of control over here, Mark. I need all kinds of help. This is, but I was just explaining to him that like, we don't respect our elders, but I can almost see why, because everyone, to your point, is running around working so hard to make ends meet. We don't have a culture or society that really enables you to have the time to go and sit down with your elders and listen to them. Like I always bring up this Croatian village that I went to as a kid, and I just learned so much from that freaking village, because in that village there was my grandfather's brother. So my grandfather passed away at the age of 99. His brother was into his hundreds, like 100 and 203, wherever. Nobody, I think they just don't know anymore. But he was older than his brother. He was always hanging around there, didn't say much, but he was always kind of respected, even though people were making jokes about him, like, there he is sitting on that log farting. Like that was kind of like one of the jokes. But they also all would say that he was the person who taught all of these people how to salt the prosciutto properly, so that we have the great prosciutto we have. It came kind of from him.
Right.
And then the younger elders, who were like, quote unquote, only in their 70s and 80s, who were still active, were the ones guiding different things. So if there was like a harvest that was going wrong, or there was like a certain type of rainfall that people hadn't seen in a while, you would go to them to say, how do we handle this? Like, I saw this happen, and there was this wisdom or knowledge passed down, and it was respected. Whereas now, I don't think anyone's stopping in at the old age home, sitting down to listen to what the older generation is saying. They're kind of tucked away, and the rest of, Western culture is running around trying to make ends meet. And to me, it's sad because I see the way elders kind of were respected in that smaller community. And maybe it's just not possible in a big population anymore. But to me, it's not possible because the money is so corrupted that the lifestyle now is just about always working to make ends meet and having no time for anything else. And we've lost this rich interactions with each other because our time is stolen. We don't have any time. Like, I don't have any time to sit down with Brent and Mark and just have these chats for hours on end because everyone's running around trying to make money. And it's really like our time is stolen from us. Our time is freaking stolen from us. It's awful.
Well, society is our view of mankind, like, it's very individualistic, right? And so you could say, well, that's an offshoot of the Reformation. Once you go away from central authority and put it in the hands of people, that's just inevitable. But it's not, because there's two aspects, right? There's your right and there's your responsibility. So we all are very big on our own rights, human rights, our right to be busy, to make money, and to do that stuff. But we forget about the responsibility to others. Right. And again, that depends on your worldview, right? If I'm not living for myself, if I'm using God's gifts for him, but also for other people, like, then maybe I can have some kind of community where older people actually mean something, right? And we respect them and we take care of them and have relationships with them, instead of just like, you're of no value to me. Unless you could maybe teach me something, but other than that,
or give me an inheritance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So we're kind of in that sort of. We've been in that worldview for a long time. I think the very individualistic, but so again, there's a parallel, right, with Bitcoiners. Most Bitcoiners are giving. And they'll just tell other people, they'll teach other people about stuff, and we got to make a living, but. I'll help. Like, what do you want to know, right? And like, you guys are examples of that here at Rockstar, and just so many Bitcoiners. You have this community, and that's what people are like. Wow, there's a community here, because we're all rallying around a central cause, and but it's not just like a bunch of investment bankers out for a weekend. That's not a community. That's just a bunch of sharks like swimming around, seeing what they can eat, right? As opposed to, you got a Bitcoin gathering. People are there to help each other, to learn, to grow. And then, what we try to cultivate in our churches is that same thing, that community. We're all here to praise God, but we're also here to, like, through serving him, that means we care about other people. So we're going to have a community in our church, and we're going to take care of people, and old people mean something. And,
Mark, were you brought up in this way? Because it's obviously very meaningful to you. Do you brought up like this? I was, but I was kind of I would say a nominal Christian for a long time. What does that mean?
So in name only, like, okay, yep, I pay lip service. I know all I know the theology, but really I was living for myself.
And if you tie it to nominal rates and
got it.
Nominal.
As soon as you say that, now I got
it. Clicks.
Got it. A real rate? Oh, real nominal.
Yeah.
Totally get that.
No, but it really didn't have a lot of meaning to me until probably a lot later in my life, which is pretty sad, right?
Was it an event?
No, I don't think it was an event. I think it was a process.
Okay.
And just different things in
questioning
my life. Yeah.
Did you start going to church more then, or were you always going to church?
I think I always went.
Okay. But it just had less of an impact on you.
Well, yeah. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian, right?
No.
How you live.
Went to Catholic school, man. You're looking at a Catholic. Yeah, for sure.
Well, but that is, I mean, some people think that, right? If I go to church, and I mean, that's actually not trying to slam Roman Catholics here, but obviously we have some differences. But like, membership in the church is your pathway to heaven in the Roman Catholic Church, right? If you're not in the church, you can't be saved. And maybe...
Yeah, if you're not baptized, you're not welcome into the kingdom of heaven. Is that a Protestant thing as well?
No, we believe in baptism, but it's not a precondition for salvation.
Got it.
our view is that it's a sign of God's faithfulness to us, right? He's just saying,
okay,
you're my children.
Wow, I'm learning so much. Yeah, great.
But I don't know where I was. So just my own faith journey. Yeah, it was just nominal, and it was not really invested for a long time. And I'm still working on that, right? That one of the things we believe is that mankind is sinful, right? All of us, we're all corrupted by sin. And so it's always going to be a struggle, right? We can work our faith out more and more, but it's not like we're working towards our own salvation, right? I believe I've got that. Jesus came, died for my sins. He gave me salvation. So I don't have to work towards that. I still have a responsibility to live my life out of gratitude and the way that I know, because now that I have the knowledge, I have to live a certain way, but that doesn't get me anything. And like we touched very briefly on like wealth as a reward from God and stuff like that, right? So that's a popular teaching in the church today. It's called the prosperity gospel or the health and wealth gospel.
Okay.
And it's an absolute perversion of what the real gospel is, right? Salvation is a gift from God that he gives to you freely. You don't have to do anything, and you certainly don't work your way towards it. And having wealth is not a sign from God, is what we believe, that you're doing something right. Right? Because what if you get cancer? What if you have a chronic illness where you can't work?
Yeah.
And and you can't ever achieve that kind of wealth.
You stole your wealth.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can't.
Well, and that's honestly so this is a bit of a sore point for me, because you have a lot of these preachers on TV, and that's people's only exposure to Christianity is like, hey, you got to call in and buy this anointing oil or plant a seed.
They still do that? That's still around?
Oh, yeah.
Is it?
It's huge.
Oh, is it?
Huge. A lot of the biggest churches by membership in the States, like individual churches, preach this, because essentially it's just preaching.
It's like those tokens you were, or whatever.
The indulgences.
The indulgences. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
modern day indulgences.
It seems similar. Just hearing it seems similar.
Well, everything comes
full circle. I see what you're saying. I feel like the happiest people in my life do have some monetary means. It's not like they're dirt poor, but wealth wasn't a path to fulfillment. And I think I always kind of heard that when I was younger. And now I feel like I've experienced it more, because over the years, I've managed to accumulate a little bit of wealth, or whatever we're going to call it. But I can see how that's not happiness. But when you're younger and you don't have any cash, you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I just want.
I don't know. I kind of differentiate between like happiness and joy. So like joy is kind of something deep seated that, my financial future might go up and down, right? But my eternal future is firm. Like I have full confidence in my eternal destiny because of what Christ has done for me. So I can have confidence in that, and that confidence leads to joy, like this deep seated joy. If I'm
is that deep seated joy coming from the fact, because you're saying what Christ has done for you, is that just fulfilling the role of having a purpose? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to discount what you said.
Yeah.
I just mean, I think all of us need a purpose. Like if you don't have a purpose, you get bored, you go crazy. Is this, when you say that, that's just giving I don't mean to demean it when I say just. I'm just trying to point out that, is this a way to have like this eternal purpose, and that's very satisfying as a human?
Yeah, I would say it's a purpose with an eternal dimension to it, right? Like it's not just I did good on this earth, so I feel good kind of purpose, right? Like, I really believe in this cause, and I'm going to go out and do my best because I believe in it. It's, I believe I'm a sinner, and I believe that I deserve eternal condemnation. And I also believe that Jesus, in his mercy, died for my sins so that I don't have to experience hell, right? An eternal separation from God. So therefore, I live in thankfulness every day. And it's humbling, right? It's like, look, my eternal destiny is taken care of by completely not my own doing. So therefore, I live in obedience and submission to God out of love for
And so what makes you a sinner?
Just the fact that you're born or conceived and born in sin. So I think it's evident because like I know myself, know well enough to know that I'm a sinner. And,
I always question that, because in Catholic school, I think I told you guys this before, when I had to go to confession, I don't know, I was a pretty good kid. Yeah. And I had to kind of lie to the priest. Good.
See, this is, what is the standard? Like sin, what does sin mean? Like sin is something that goes contrary to God's will. So can you say that, like you had the example before of like, a cup of water and it's pure water and you put one drop of something else in there and now it's no longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. I forgot.
Right? Like you put a drop of poison in a glass of water, it's mostly good. Like, you can drink it, but you are now going to die if you drink that. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's the same sort of thing.
Sinner is like you're not 100% pure.
Yeah. So God demands perfection. God is perfectly holy, perfectly, perfect. So how can we attain that standard as human beings who are fallen and broken people? Like we might have a good day and that's great, but like good according to what standard, first of all? Yeah. And then like, can you sustain that for your whole life? Like you might have a sinful thought. You might have a sinful, so it's humbling to just accept the fact that you are a sinner. And that's kind of the first step to like the faith journey, I think, is acknowledging there's a problem. And then we talk about this with the money system too, right? Like you start with the problem, like, hey guys, this is broken. Mm-hmm. This doesn't work. There's a solution over here. Okay, well, let's explore that more, right?
You will never convince anybody about that Bitcoin is a good or necessary thing unless they first accept that there's a problem, right? And that's where everybody starts,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If they think, and I've had this conversation many times, right? Like, what's wrong with our money system? It's fine. Then Bitcoin is just like a distraction, right? Once people realize there's a problem, and more people are realizing that now because they can't pay their bills, they're like, I'm still doing what I was doing 10 years ago, working hard, but things have changed. What is it? Oh, it's the system. So the same kind of idea. If you don't have that
Got it. Yeah.
starting point,
because that is helpful in
nothing else.
Bitcoin. So then that's where that is happening to you. You're saying, well, the default operating system of a human is as a sinner. Yeah. And if you accept that, then you can understand that there's this one truth, and that is what you are living to aspire to.
And the worst thing is if you don't acknowledge that you're a sinner, right? Like if you just go your life.
I'm not sure I do.
Right? If you go your life.
We're working on you.
Oh shit.
But if you go your entire life thinking you're good, right? Yeah. Then you never realize there's a problem, right? So
damn, I thought I was a good person. Now you guys are leaving like, shit, man. What's wrong with me?
I think I'm a good person too, selfishly, but I acknowledge I'm not, right? Like, and that's where you start looking at the book, like the Bible, and you compare your life. It's like, okay, God demands this and I did that. It's like, oh, okay, well, I didn't meet that command, right? Okay, well, I'm a sinner. Mm-hmm. Like you could just start at
okay, got it. Right? Yeah. I see. I guess the word sin is just like almost it's such a powerful word to me. Yeah. I don't know why. That just feels like, wow.
It should be.
You're really going for it when you're saying we're all sinners. You're like,
eternal,
I'm like,
we believe it's eternal consequence, right? Mm-hmm. So, like in my life too, I try to.
Can I just use that as an excuse when I screw up? Sometimes I'm going to just tell people, hey, listen, man, I'm a sinner. What do you want me to do? Hey, guys, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, that's a common attitude.
That's the first step. Acknowledge it. And then what do? You repent, right? That's the
well, you find a savior, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so there's an example in the Bible for us, I think, where Jesus came, and you like the 10 Commandments. You know the 10 Commandments, right? So you could, and a lot of people will look at.
Quest trivia. What's the first commandment?
Oh God, I won't be able to recite them, but yes. I mean, he looks like someone delivering the 10 Commandments to me right now with this beard. Keep going, Mark.
Moses was actually the first person to use technology, right? He downloaded the law onto a tablet.
Yeah. I love that. That I'm all on board with. I love that kind of explanation. Yeah,
it's a joke. It's a stone.
Stone tablet, but it was
bad
technology. It was written down. I'm on board with this.
Oh, okay, I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, it was written down.
Well, he downloaded from the cloud onto a tablet.
Onto the stone, permanent
from the cloud.
Oh my God. The internet did exist back then.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you got the 10 Commandments, and a lot of people will look at that, and there were people like the Israelites in the Old Testament who looked at that and said, okay, I've obeyed all of these, so I'm good, right? Jesus came and said, okay, so it says, do not murder. That's cool. You haven't murdered, Tom, but Jesus said, I tell you, if you condemn your brother in your heart, or if you call your brother a fool, or if you hate him, you're murdering him in your heart. Right. And so you have, going a little bit deeper, maybe, like everything is, or if you build something, you're actually building it maybe twice or three times, right? So if you build a house, there's the actual physical building of the house, but before that, you build it on paper. You build it in your head, right? So when we think of, how things actually happen, it's not just the physical act that's important, but it's the conception, the preconception of that thing. So when we talk about murder, well, murder starts with hate in your heart towards somebody. So Jesus said that is the same thing. Right? You're not actually stabbing somebody in the neck.
The physical world is a manifestation of what began as a thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
Same thing with the sexual sins, right? Like, do not commit adultery. Okay, well, I didn't sleep with someone outside of my marriage, but, I saw that lady and I lusted after her, right? So like that is what Jesus said as well, right?
Yeah.
Just look at the heart.
Got it.
Right?
And
there was actually that was in the, do not covet is one of the commandments.
Yeah.
Well, that's a heart thing. Right. That's like looking at Tom's Tesla and going like, oh, I really want to have that. Yeah. Like, how can I get that?
Yeah.
What do I do? Can I screw Tom over somehow to get his Tesla? Right.
You could just ask me. We can try with that.
I never thought of that,
like
Tom.
a 50-50 chance probably. I don't know. Here you go.
But that's the idea. It's a heart thing. I guess is the idea. So when we say like, yeah, I'm pretty good because I haven't stolen, I haven't done this. Well, it's like, okay, now re-examine your life in regards to the sort of spiritual manifestation of those thoughts. Like, have you done any of those? And then I know for myself, and this is kind of important, right? Evolution of belief or Christianity, I guess, right? It used to be like the priest looking at you, Tom, you've done wrong, right? With sort of the Reformation and with the new way of thinking about it, it's not like I'm pointing at myself first, right? Before I say you've done this or you've done that, I got to look at myself and what have I done? And that's my primary concern, not to tell you what you've done wrong, but to figure out what I've done wrong, change my life, and then maybe you'll see that and you'll be like, oh, why do you live that way? Or why are you doing that way? As a much more effective way of I think, evangelizing than, and there's room for the spoken word and for talking to people, right? But you're never going to come to church or open the Bible.
Yeah, that's a much better way to go about life.
Yeah, if you look at me and you're like, no, that guy, like, he's at the strip club all the time. Or,
well, I mean, look, like I said, I went to Croatia a lot as a kid, so I went to church a lot as a kid. It's a Catholic country, and when I was a kid, they were still even doing a lot of it in Latin. But I'll never forget when an aunt that was really close to me passed away. To get a prayer said for her in church, it's widely accepted that I had to go and pay the priest. So then I went, and with my cousin, we went to the priest's house. This is only like, I don't know, this is like 5 years ago. Maybe 5 years ago, wow. Less. And paid the priest one amount of money. Then he made a note to say, however many prayers he was going to say at the church. And that was like a political thing because you wanted your family's name said in church. That kind of signals to everyone else you're supporting the church. And it's like this political thing. But then there was another amount of money that we gave that was off the books. If the first one was on the book, because he wrote it in his little paper, I don't want to call it a ledger, but some documented thing. Kind of was like, this family paid me this much, right? And then there was another amount that we just gave because that's what that's what my cousin who lives there is like, this is what you do. And I'm like, really? Like, how much do I give this guy? Like, are we giving euros? Like, what kind of currency am I using? And then
you didn't give
there was
Bitcoin,
no.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Gave some euros, and that was like just an off the books accepted amount of what you did. And I just remember thinking it was just so fascinating. But so my exposure to the church through my whole life has been me questioning some of these practices. So when I hear you guys describe it, it is definitely a different take on it, a different stance, a different interpretation of it. My exposure has been really just different.
In many ways, it's a rabbit hole, right? Like once you start thinking, it's like, oh, I'm going to question this. Like, why do I believe that? And then you start reading, right? And we start reading stuff, and then you start cross-referencing different parts of the Bible, and you're like, okay, if it says this here and it says this here, like, how do I determine what's the right thing?
How can you reconcile it? Because when you see behavior like I just described, in my mind, it's like, well, I'm going to listen to these guys say, because when you see things like this, it just didn't jive with me. Yeah. It was incongruent, right? So it then diminished anything that was spoken. I thought, oh, well, this is like this. None of this is adding up. It's all broken.
Yeah.
So if you just think of the thief on the cross, now if you're familiar with the story, but when Jesus was crucified, right, he was put on that cross. There were two people next to him, right? And they're called thieves, but they're likely you wouldn't get crucified just for stealing, right? So they're probably like robbers, like a band of robbers. Anyways, they were kind of insulting Jesus at first, and the one continued, and the other one eventually said, like, no, stop, like this is the Son of God, right? Don't do that. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, you are going to be with me in paradise today. And that was, so the only thing that guy did was to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God. He didn't, nobody said prayers for him, nobody bought anything. He didn't live a good life. He didn't make amends for all the, like, perhaps in his heart, because he realized there's something else going on here, right? But I guess my point is, salvation's free. You just need to acknowledge Jesus, and everything else it's not window dressing. Like, we have responsibilities here, but that's all that is required. And if somebody tells you something different, like,
that's not the gospel.
Go read your Bible.
Yeah.
That's all.
He was saying, like, this robber was saying, we are here justly because our sins deserve this punishment. Like, he's like, I can see in my life I did this, and now I'm getting punished for it. And that's a just thing, right? According to the law, I shouldn't have done this, so now I'm getting punished. But he said about Jesus, he's like, he didn't do anything wrong, and he's getting punished. So it's kind of like, why are we hurling insults at this man, right?
You guys on your podcast, this is what you talk about?
This is the context from which we talk.
We don't, actually, to be honest, we don't usually get this deep. So our podcast is aimed at Christians, and maybe we should be a little bit more explicit, but we presuppose a level of knowledge, right? This is what we kind of started it for, because there wasn't really much in that we could see anyways, Christians in real estate. Right. So we're presupposing a level of knowledge, but we also don't, it's just like our daily lives, right? We're not having these conversations all the time in our daily lives, right? I might be talking.
Like fascinating conversation.
It's not like you go to the grocery store.
Yeah. Hey, I just had this thought. Yeah. Challenge me on this?
You're a sinner.
There's room
I just saw you cut that lady off at the self-checkout. Okay? I just saw that.
You're a sinner?
I saw that. Sinner.
I need
sinner just yelling across the store.
I need someone like that in my life, actually, just to hold me accountable. Yeah. But no, I mean, on the podcast, we talk a lot about real estate, and so we just have some practical stuff, right? Like, I'm into short-term rentals, he's into densification. So some episodes, that's what we talk about.
Okay,
right?
Got it.
But the idea is that this is what underpins our belief system and how we act, how we should act, and everything that we do. So, it maybe sounds a little bit corny, but like, if he's building an ADU, he's building it to the glory of God. That's the ultimate purpose behind it. And he's not, they're not necessarily thinking that when they're pouring concrete or, or framing it or whatever, but that's not that he's actually pouring
concrete.
And why,
sorry, and then why, explain that one to me, because you lost me there.
So I'm just saying this underpins our existence.
Okay, everything you do is in alignment. Yeah,
but then not always.
No, not always, but that's the idea.
Yeah, but that's why we don't always say on the podcast, like, okay, I'm running this Airbnb to God's glory, because it's kind of understood, and it also kind of cheapens it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is, we're not Bible thumping, I guess, on the podcast all the time. We'll talk about it, and we'll talk about things from a Christian perspective. But we're not always going this deep and talking about the Reformation or what absolute truth is, right? Like,
these conversations, I think, are very useful. And I just think that if I just look around my world, much of them can't happen because the money is broken. So I see how Bitcoin fits into your world of view, because to me, if we can fix the inequality in the money, the stopping the theft of time and labor, it frees human nature to explore these other ideas, where I think right now everyone's on the hamster wheel, and there's just no time to even sit down and really explore these and to agree or even disagree or challenge and really think about this kind of stuff. And it would be really useful, I think, to be able to have more conversations around this kind of stuff.
Hey, we'll come on again.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I just thought of quickly, the word fiat, right? You guys talk about this all the time, and I feel like it's kind of come up more frequently just in conversations.
Yeah, because it never used to come up. Like we used to talk about it, never did. Now I love it because it's everywhere.
So I think we have a pretty firm grasp, and listeners might have a firm grasp of what fiat money is, but like in the Bible, so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so God created everything, right? And it says fiat lux. That's the first thing, like God spoke. He said, let there be light, right? So God spoke and there was something, right? So God has this power invested in him to create things out of nothing that human beings don't possess, right? We don't really have that power. So when the government says like fiat money or let there be money, like money by my decree, who said so? Well, I said so. It's like, well, who are you, right? You're not God. And God can say, let there be light and let there be all kinds of things. And they do exist, right? And who are we to contest that? But when governments and people who are what we confess like weak sinners do this, it's corrupted, right? So like if you have a gold standard, for example, like at least what we're doing with a gold standard is rooting our monetary system in nature, which was created by God. So it has that kind of sense of reality or restriction on, just printing it to oblivion or debasing it, right? And there's still that human tendency, right? But whenever you add humans in the mix, they're sinful and they're like, I'm going to corrupt this to my advantage, right? Even if they say they're not going to for a while, then the temptation's too large and they do, right? So that's just an interesting parallel that I thought of after last time we tried to do this.
Gold is like I think this is something Lynn Alden I think mentions is like nature's ledger. And then man came in and decreed this other thing over it and tried to make this other ledger that it told you was the all powerful truth.
Yeah, and you can see what that does to society, right? Like if you live in with a false sense of reality, and the government has basically power over the money supply, and they can dilute it to their advantage or to the advantage of the people close to them, that has effects all across society. And then the incentives for people to behave properly just kind of diminish, right?
And it gets more obvious, like when they were only stealing 2% a year, quote unquote. It was like, okay, it's small enough that most people didn't even really feel it or notice it. But then when the theft got to a documented 8%, which we all know was higher than that, then you just look around the world right now and it's kind of no wonder to me that people can't find good workers in different areas. It's like, why work if you pay tax? No, but really like...
and it comes to light when you can start to see the change in your lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm younger than Mark. So if I can see in my lifetime that the education system has deteriorated, right? Like I went through college and now I have siblings who are 10, 12 years younger than me, and they're choosing to not go because it's just ridiculous. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's in 10 years. Yeah. Like all of this generation is not going to school anymore. Like, right. And they're working hard and they want to get ahead and they have the same kind of drive that I did, but the education system's deteriorated and they're just not interested.
So I wonder it just feels like, I guess things for people to like see, if we just kind of steer the conversation a little bit just to the financial side now for a second and just Bitcoin, I feel like it's going to take a much greater societal breakdown for people to be able to see what Bitcoin is. Because to your point earlier, Mark, people need to see the kind of like what's wrong with something to see the kind of maybe the answer.
Yeah.
And I feel like people still don't see what's wrong with stuff, even though maybe you're banging the table, you're banging that, and we're all banging the table.
The pain's getting higher.
It is getting higher, but I feel like it's still not seen.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to get together with some, friends that I haven't seen in a long time. And I'm sure in that conversation, Bitcoin's going to come up and it'll just be dismissed by a few of them for sure and completely outright. Just, that is funny. Let's move the discussion on,
How about the Leafs?
Yeah.
Speaking of pain and suffering.
Yeah. So I guess, Brent, I really want you to just share, what are you doing in the real estate world? Mark's been on, but I just get a quick update from you, Mark, as well. But you've been on talking about what you do in the real estate world. What are you doing right now with Good Stewards?
So, I used to work in industrial design, which is product design, and I kind of got jaded with that industry a little bit because this is a fiat conversation all over again, right? Because even that industry is impacted by, we have to mass produce the next big thing, and you have a new blow dryer, and you can make a new blow dryer next year that has to be a little bit better and sell it to everybody and make lots of money. And so, during COVID, I quit my job and I started a full-time company. Well, started a company with my wife called Good Stewards. So while I was working, I had bought a property. I think it was 2014, and this huge brainwave. Like I got the mortgage statement after a year, and I was working like full time at that time, right? So I was like, okay, this is great. What is this piece of mail? I've never got one of these before. CIBC is probably like I owe them. This is
never good news. It's never good news.
Honey, put it on the junk pile. But I opened it up and it's like $8,900 or something of principal pay down. And I was going through the numbers, right? Like, okay, you pay your tax. There's some life insurance in there, and then like the interest component. Like, okay, whatever, right? I signed up for this. I know what I'm getting into. And then the principal, I was like, how am I going to work that many hours to make this money? And the tenants just paid for it all. And that was like, I got to read and do this. And then I was like, okay, I got to help other people do this. And that was kind of been my life for the last 9-10 years because
that was such a gain to you. You couldn't even comprehend it.
I was like, I would have to work an extra month or two and I just don't have that time. Right. And so I can see even now after the first year that this is going to benefit my life over the long term. And I want other people to see the same thing, right? And then you start going down all these rabbit holes, right? It's like, okay, well, what's the power of leverage? Oh, what's the, and you start looking at the money system and all the advantages of real estate in different areas and different strategies, right? So my car, back and forth to Toronto every day was like this little university on wheels, right? The podcast going and you guys and whatever, right? So I kind of started Good Stewards with that same kind of mission that we've spoke about stewardship, but to help other people steward their wealth wisely as well, right? So
are you working with other people now or helping?
Yeah, so we've done a bunch of joint ventures with people where we co-own the property and we'll go out and we'll buy something and intensify it, and then we do the property management as well for long-term rentals. I think you talked about Mark, he's in the short-term space. We're kind of in the long-term, like just a regular lease. But yeah, now we're
intensifying it. So maybe turning a single family into a legal duplex.
Exactly.
Or something like that?
Okay. Turning a single family home that's underutilized into a duplex or a triplex, or maybe severing the land, building multiple units, and kind of looking at that strategy. And what I've been seeing over the last little while is, single family homes used to be this thing where you could just buy it and then rent it out. And
crazy concept, right?
Yeah, but it was
good old days, Brent.
Real estate
you're too young to remember those days, Brent.
It used to be so attainable for people, right?
We used to rent out single family homes on the Hamilton Mountain for like $1,400, and it was like, I think that's okay. Like maybe the cash flow will only be this much, but we're good. Like $1,400 whole home.
Yeah,
whole home.
Wow,
that was like the 2000 and mid 2005 2010 era.
Yeah, so in a way that's exciting, in a way it's kind of sad, but we find ourselves in this situation where we're like analyzing the macro level picture, and most people don't do this, right? So you analyze it and you're like, guys, we got to do something. Like you're working really hard and you're saving, and I laud you for that, but you're not investing, so you're not getting ahead. So we have people come to the office and tell us hey, I got these mutual funds and they just got destroyed and whatever, right? And I'm like, well, obviously, like you're you're in the wrong game, right? So our whole mission is to try and help people to like acknowledge that they have blessings and then steward them well. And people don't really realize there's so many people who have like, they own a house and they have like a little mortgage or no mortgage, right? And they have good income.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm good, right?
Yep.
And I'm trying to say,
well, a lot of those grew up in the era of 18% interest rates in the 80s.
Yeah,
so they're just not willing to take on any debt at all, which sometimes you can't argue against that because that's their bias or their frame of reference, right?
So it is risk, right? And like investing your money is risk, and that's kind of sucks because you have to invest in this environment, but you want a partner or like somebody who can kind of guide you. And that's the kind of the role we want to fill, is coming in and saying, look, like we've done this before.
Very cool.
Right. So walk people through the steps, and it's really rewarding. I really enjoy it. And
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of stress. Yeah. But it's funny you say that about the envelope. My experience of really questioning my corporate 9-to-5 role was driving on the 403, and Nick and I had already owned student rentals in Hamilton, and I'll just never forget the traffic going eastbound along the 403 through Mississauga to get to my job was bumper to bumper, and the other direction was wide open.
Yeah.
And our properties were in the other direction. I'm like, I could just get on the 403 and go to Hamilton, and those properties, when we would open the statements, we bought one a student rental for $250,000. We thought we got ripped off. And in short order, we were like, wow, look at all the equity that we're building up here. And I just similar to you looking at your statement, I'll just never forget driving to that corporate job going, what am I doing? Like, I'm making more money with these properties that are in the other direction.
And you're doing less work.
I'm doing less work. And also the highway is clear.
Yeah.
It was just like, I'm like, what am I doing? And it was just every day it irritated me more and more and more.
Well, the difficult part is that, like what I was saying earlier about the single family home, it used to be like you just buy one and then rent it out, right? But it's getting increasingly difficult for the average person who has a job to like put that aside and go.
Yeah, and then just to give some frame of reference, when we rented those homes out, at that time, a family paying $1,400 a month to rent that home was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So just for context, I know looking back now, it looks like, oh my gosh, but in that era, $1,400 as a percentage of your income, it really still was like, wow, like this is quite a lot.
Yeah, but I guess the point is that the numbers worked, right? Like your rents covered your mortgage or your debt and all the expenses, and made some money. So it was a prudent investment. But now you can't just buy a house and rent it out and expect it to carry itself. So it's actually not going to be a great investment because you're going to have to put your own money in every month.
And that's when we turned to student rentals, because we're like, oh gosh, this isn't working. Okay, there's this thing with real estate's interesting. It's creative in that we can take the same home and rent it to students, provide good housing here, good, clean, safe, and functional housing. And this would be the return. That was also led us down that whole rent to own concept. We're like, oh gosh, like we could offer a family the opportunity to buy this house from us, and the higher than average rent was only slightly higher, but it made enough sense then for us to buy the property. And we had multiple people buy rent to owns out in that process, and kind of was like, there was all this new ways. And now today, I guess part of that is that it just requires more of your time and more expertise and more dedication, right? Like that's fair for sure. For like a student rental, there's just a little bit of extra complex or complexity to it that the average person who's like, I just don't really, it becomes this barrier to entry. For sure. Like you go into your corporate job and it like you make great income. That's great. But I would invest, but I just don't have the time. And the corporate salary is quote unquote guaranteed. I know on the end of the month, I'm getting paid.
Yeah. So I'm not going to reduce my time at work because I got this on the go. Right. And people don't really necessarily think about it either. Right?
I guess what really got me to challenge my thinking was extrapolating my life forward 20 years. And I remember thinking, it's funny because I'm 50 now, and I remember thinking if I was 50 and I had to go to my boss and ask for approval to take like a 2 weeks vacation and get denied, well, you might as well stab me in the leg, because like that would be the lowest of the low. Like I'm just not, I really like my autonomy and my sovereignty. So I'm just not the person to ask for something and get denied. I'm just not my personality type. But I thought, if I'm 50 years old and like that happens to me, well, I mean, then that's it. Like this is just a horror show. Yeah. So that really did it for me. And then that was, 30 around that time. And that's when I decided I must change my path. Yeah. Because this path sucks.
Yeah. See, I had quite a bit of autonomy at my job at the time, it was a huge blessing. It was great. But, you know, when I got that statement in the mail, the mortgage statement, you see the principal on there, that was like, there is just no competition here, right? Like the amount of work
changed your context entirely.
The amount of work that I put into the property versus the amount of work hours I put in at work. It just didn't make sense. Like, why is that one worth so much more than this one, right?
And then, so Mark, what can you tell? I don't know if you want to give an update on your book or, you know, midterm rentals. Is that something you're still doing?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my wife and I own a company, Joy Hill Property Management, and we specialize in short and midterm rentals. So kind of we do manage some long-term rentals as well, but that's not like our passion, right? We started out renting our basement many years ago, and not as a result of any deep thinking, but just like, I think we can get more money doing this.
Yeah.
Right? This Airbnb is pretty cool. We liked it traveling, so we did that, and then just we've kind of leveraged that into a business where we do it for other people, right? And it's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and we're doing more remote management now. Oh, because a lot of municipalities are really regulating the heck out of short-term rentals to the point where, unless it's your primary residence, you can't do it. And that's just that's the future, I think, in Canada, anyways, because we like regulation so much. So we're going to
regulate new homes into existence. That's how we we have regulated that Canada must have more homes, so it must happen by decree.
Yeah,
don't get me started on that.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But so we manage short and midterm rentals for people, whatever strategy works, and doing more of the remote stuff. We do some hands-on as well, but that's just sort of the Hamilton area. And we wrote a book about our experiences.
Share the name of the book?
You, Me, and Airbnb, and that's on Amazon. It's about short and midterm rentals, but it's also just about our journey in real estate. And like, we're just a regular couple. We bought our first investment property in, I think, 2018, and that's without really understanding things. We didn't really get serious about real estate till probably 2020, right? Maybe 2019 when we joined Rockstar.
Wow.
And, really,
you seem so experienced now. I mean, it's 2023.
It's the beard.
Yeah, it's
without it, you'd be like,
credibility.
What is
this dude?
Well, I mean, we had been doing Airbnb for, it's been probably 10 years now, right?
Got it.
So we have a fair amount of depth in that area, but in just learning about real estate, we're still new. So so that's what we do. And we have 4 kids at home. They're in school, the oldest 3 anyways, but we've kind of tried to shape our lives in a way where we can be with our kids, and we can have, and it's not just about freedom, but quality of life, but also just like,
awesome.
That's
awesome.
This is what we do, right? Part of that's our Christian worldview. And part of it is just like, we want to have this life where we could both go out and have jobs and honestly earn more income, right? More T4 income. But then we wouldn't be around with the kids. And we did that for the first few years of our marriage. My wife was a nurse, and so she was doing shift work. I worked, I was doing construction and different things. And then I started a business, but, it was just brutal, right? We'd be dropping like one of the kids off at somebody's house, or like she would finish her shift,
just run
and go pick up the kid that I had just dropped off or whatever, right? And just brutal. So there's more to wealth than just simple financial wealth, right? There's wealth in terms of your standard of living. So, anyways, that's kind of what we do.
The depth of your experience.
Home.
Yes.
Yeah, and we love it.
Awesome.
So, that's
and Brent, you have, did you say 3 kids?
Yeah, we have 3 kids. We got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 5-month-old.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, it's hectic.
You guys are both busy. I got to say, like, I just feel really grateful and blessed and honored that we've crossed paths the way we have, the way you guys kind of contribute back into different Rockstar investors and helping people and guiding them. And, I just feel fortunate that there's people like you that are contributing to other investors who you don't really know too well, and the way you do. So thank you for everything that you guys are doing. We really, really appreciate it. You know, it gives, I think, Nick and I a lot of reasons to keep doing this business, seeing what you guys do and how you interact. It's really cool. So I really don't know how to thank you enough. And thank you for coming on and sharing this. The name of the podcast and the website for anyone who wants to find the podcast is
TwoStewards.ca. TWO Stewards.ca.
And then is it an episode a week, a month?
Yeah, one a week.
One a week that goes out. And
it's tough. Sometimes it's like the last minute. We're like, Mark, we got to do one.
Yeah. Consistency is tough. So TwoStewards.ca, and it's called the Two Stewards Show.
Yeah.
Correct?
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate this.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for the whole Rockstar platform and ecosystem, right? Because you guys put yourselves out there and also help investors without, I mean, you make some money, but there's a lot. It's not just like a real estate brokerage. There's lots of those around, but all the stuff you do naturally is going to attract people like us who want to help others. And we've seen that with so many other Rockstar members as well. I'm gushing here, but no, it's a really cool thing. That's part of what attracted us to this. So like we can be here and we can contribute, and it'll be valued, and we can receive value from, and like we've learned a ton from you guys too. So
yeah, thanks for that. Sometimes, you know, when you could do more or different, or why are we not doing this? You kind of are just very self-critical. And I think sometimes Nick and I are like, oh, we could be also sharing this or explaining things this way. But then behind the scenes, we can barely pull off what we're pulling off. You know what I mean? We're scrambling to pull all of this off, right? So anyway, thanks for that, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thanks, both of you. Thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.